Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another video for EVE Echoes. In today's video we're going to be continuing and indeed finalising our little mini-series helping you to prepare for Tech Level 10 by having a look at the last remaining ships that will unlock once you hit EVE Echoes' final content tier. Now, we've already covered battleships, battle cruisers, destroyers, and even industrial vessels in other videos, so if you're keen to learn about what ships are coming out at Tech 10 for your particular favourite class, do check in the description down below. I have put a link in there to a playlist. I've gathered all of those videos together. It's worth noting at this point though, in several of those videos I talk about armor guardians, and I massively misrepresented them. I was under the impression that armor guardians were absolutely terrible. Turns out they are absolute god tier, but we'll cover that in a future video. But anyway, with all of the other different types covered, I think it's about high time that we sat down and talked about my favourite class of vessel, the humble frigate, hence the fact that we have a Condor II Interceptor on screen now, using the really cool Guristas Veteran Nanocore skin. Looks badass, doesn't it? Anyway, so what we're going to do is talk about the different frigates that are going to become available once you hit Tech Level 10, what you might want to use them for, which ones are going to be best to build, which ones are going to be best to fly, etc, etc. If you've been watching the others, you know the drill by now. So please, if you enjoy this video, do hit like on it, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, and if you fancy supporting the channel financially, you can do so either by joining us over on Patreon or by checking out our Redbubble merchandise store, both of which are also linked in the description below. That said and done, however, let's jump right into talking about the various different Tech 10 frigates coming soon to EVE Echoes. If you've watched any of the other videos in this series, you know we're going to start with the Amarr Empire, then proceed counterclockwise through the Caldari State to the Gallente Federation, and finally, saving the best for last, we'll finish off with the Minmatar Republic. It's also worth noting that all four of the factions have the same 3 ships at the top. They each get a new interceptor, a new exploration frigate, and a new stealth bomber, so please bear that in mind as we go through, because I will be referencing these back and forth as we go. If you do want to go to a particular empire, I have taken the time to put timestamps in the description below, so if you want to jump straight to the Gallente Federation, check the description and you can pop straight through to there. That said though, let's jump into the Amarr Empire, head to the top, and take a look at their Interceptor. This, at Tech Level 10, is the Executioner II Interceptor, and I really like the Tash Mercon skins that are being used on the Amarr ships here. I've described this as kind of a pearlescent grey and a fiery orange-red metallic colour to it as well. I just like that, and they get some interesting skins from some of the nanocores, but hey, I think the original is a great way for this one. Now, as we look at the Executioner II Interceptor, as with all of the Tech 2 Interceptors, we're getting the same fitting profile of 3 highs, 3 mids, 3 lows, 3 power grid, and 3 engineering rigs. Sorry, 3 combat and 3 engineering rigs. I've not said that one in a while. 3 combat rigs and 3 engineering rigs. We get solid defences here on the Executioner II Interceptor, and actually quite a large cargo hold, which is very useful, as we'll see later. Now, as we go further down, however, you'll see that the actual defences don't really matter on this. We have a ship that is 21.4 metres in signature radius, with a flight velocity of 524 metres per second. This thing is ridiculously fast. On top of that, it only has a mass of 1.09 million kilograms and a very low inertial modifier of 1.2, which makes it very agile. A high scan resolution of 934mm means that this can also lock on ridiculously quickly, and if we were to check its standard fitting thing here, I do hope that NetEase add this eventually, you can see the source radius for the Executioner II Interceptor is going to sit at 120 meters, which makes it remarkably difficult to scan down. Now, the Executioner II Interceptor is therefore a direct upgrade over the Executioner Interceptor, and my goodness, it is one heck of an upgrade. This thing is faster, smaller, harder to scan, better target locking, better defences, and then when we come into the trait descriptions, it has better stats too. Now, not only are we getting an increase to Warp Disruptor optimal range and Warp Scrambler optimal range, a 6% increase to both of those, plus a 15% reduction to Micro Warp Drive signature radius penalty, which means if you have a Micro Warp Drive active, the bloom is going to be reduced by 75%, so rather than it being a 500% bloom, you're looking at around about 400% instead, actually slightly lower than 400, I think it's about 370 if I work it out. You've then got the Immune to Interdictor Sphere, ability that Interceptors are renowned for, and as we go further down, Advanced Frigate Command is going to give us a 10% reduction to small laser capacitor need, meaning your small lasers use 50% less capacitor than they otherwise would, and they're getting an absolutely insane 17.5% increase to small laser damage. That is absolute madness. That's literally like an 80% DPS increase over those lasers, which is, it kicks out a lot of firepower, is what I'm saying here. Now, the Executioner II Interceptor, as I said, it's fast, it's a laser boat. You're going to do well either with pulses or beams. I think pulses are going to be your better option, simply because of the speeds that you're going to be going, but I like this vessel. I think this is an excellent little PvP hunter. I think the Executioner Interceptor is one of those that often gets overlooked because people tend to like the look of the slasher, and the Condor Interceptor, of course, is just king of the roost, plus the Atron has its ability for the additional cargo hold, that kind of thing. But the Executioner II Interceptor, I would argue, is one of the better ones in PvP, simply because those lasers can absolutely wreck shields, and certainly since we've had the buffs in the recent balance patch to add to lasers, well, I think the Executioner II Interceptor is a terrifying vessel to run, and following a common theme here, I do actually wish that these get nerfed. I don't think that an Interceptor should be kicking out as much damage as these things do, but hey, apparently I'm alone in that. Netties are pretty set on things being the way they are. As we then move on to the Explorer frigate here for the Amarr Empire, we have the Magnate Explorer. Again, very handsome Tash Murkon skin there. Looks really nice on the Magnate, actually. I'm not normally a fan of this vessel. That hook bill's a little bit too esoteric for my liking, but I do like the colour scheme of it. Again, as we take a look at it, it is a standard Explorer frigate, meaning it has the same fitting profile pretty much as the Covert Ops Tier 5 variant. It's just getting an additional combat rig, an additional power grid rig, and curiously enough, an additional drone tube. It gets a drone tube. This is a frigate that uses drones, but there are no bonuses to it, and combat drones don't really do much, so I don't know. We'll talk about that later on. Again, we have an incredibly small signature radius, a very nice flight velocity of 481, very small mass of 1.072 million kilograms, slightly higher inertia modifier this time of 2.6, not that it matters. Interestingly enough, you'll see as well the scan resolution here is slightly lower than obviously the Interceptors, because you're not really going to be using this in a combat potential. If we come out and have a look then quickly at the Magnate Explorer's source radius, you'll see 121 meters. Again, it is a very small ship. It is going to be very difficult to scan. And speaking of scanning, once we come into its trait descriptions, you'll see that the Magnate Explorer is going to get the typical Explorer bonuses here. They all have the same one of a 10% increase to scan resolution, a 5% reduction to the minimum scan radius of your scanners, and a 5% reduction to the scan radius of your narrow resonance scanners. Means that if you're being a combat scanner, you are less likely to alert your opponent because they've got a 25% reduction to your scan radius, and then a 25% reduction to the minimum scan radius also means you're going to find other ships easier. You can scan some of the really hard to find ships thanks to a 25% additional reduction to the minimum scan radius of your scanning equipment. And again, if you want to go PvE scanning, looking for like the Nihilist space, etc., you're going to find that a lot easier using a magnet. Also, we have the ability to fit covert ops cloaking devices, just in case anyone was unsure. Obviously, what with the Tech 5 ones being the Magnate Covert Ops, I think a lot of people I've had a lot of people asking, are the Explorer frigates able to fit covert ops? I don't know why they don't just open it and check, but yes, they absolutely can. Finally then, as we come down, you'll see we have Advanced Frigate Command here on the Magnate Explorer is a 5% reduction to inertia modifier per level, so that is a 25% reduction on the 2.6 that we have there. So if I do my usual little thing here of pulling up my calculator, and we have a look at 2.6, and we are going to minus 25% off that, you'll see that gives us a total inertia modifier of 1.95. That is a big reduction and makes this the fastest to align. If you've watched my video on which of the Explorer frigates is best for you, which of the Covert Ops frigates is best for you, it's going to be basically the same for all four of these at tech level 10, meaning the Magnate Explorer it's going to be better at going long distances because it aligns faster and it allows it to jump that little bit quicker. If you hit a gate that's not camped, you're going to be able to jump faster from it. going to and from warp is just it's a much faster experience. So useful if you're going through hostile territory, but you're not worried too much about gate camps. You think you can still get out of those just with manual piloting and the Covert Ops cloak. The fact that you can just warp that little bit faster is really, really useful. Finally then, saving the worst for last this time, we come to the Purifier 3. This is the stealth bomber, and again, it looks awesome. I love the look of the Purifier stealth bombers, they're very cool. The fact that they got the recent updates that mean their torpedoes actually appear on them properly now as well is just extra cool. And it is a straight up upgrade over the Purifier 2. It gets an additional high slot, so it can now fit 4 large torpedoes rather than just 3, still having 3 mids, 3 lows, and then 3 of each of the combat rigs and power grid rigs. I think actually that is an additional rig. I can't remember, it's been so long since I flew a stealth bomber Tech 2. As we go though, again, very small signature radius, 22.8, surprisingly slow flight velocity of 363 meters per second, fairly high inertia modifier as well, and a large mass of 14.95. Now already you should be able to see that this is not a particularly fast frigate, it's a little bit slower and lumbering compared to the other ones we've had a look at. The big problem comes in its stats. So, as with the other stealth bombers, we have a 99% reduction to the amount of power grid required to fit large torpedoes, which is awesome. It means we can fit large torpedoes onto a frigate, which is just frankly insane. We get a 100% reduction to the cloaking device lock delay, so when you drop a cloak, you can lock immediately rather than having to wait however many seconds, and we get a 50% reduction to the time it takes between dropping a cloak and reapplying it. Obviously as well, we have the ability to fit the Covert Ops cloak. Wouldn't be much of a stealth bomber if it couldn't stealth. Then if we look at its other stats, however, this is where things start to come undone. We get a 15% increase to large torpedo electromagnetic damage, a 7.5% increase to large torpedo thermal damage, which is nice. That's additional damage on torpedoes, both on the electromagnetic and thermal spectrum, which helps them cut through shields that bit faster. And we get a 10% increase to large torpedo flight velocity, which gives them extra range. Sounds cool, right? Yeah, except remember you're using large torpedoes. Large torpedoes have an insanely slow explosion velocity and an insanely large explosion radius, which means it doesn't matter how much damage you're going to be doing on paper with them, you're not going to be able to apply it to anything smaller than a Citadel. This means that currently, the Purifier 3 and all the other Tech Level 3 stealth bombers are essentially just going to be used for taking out, like, outposts and things like that. I think, honestly, if you've got a choice between going for a Purifier and a Purifier 2 and you're going to hunt miners or anything smaller than battleships, the number one is better. The fact that it uses medium torpedoes rather than large torpedoes genuinely helps. What these ships need, but don't have, is a reduction to the explosion radius and an increase to explosion velocity. At least one of those, if not both. I would genuinely take that over the additional damage. Don't give me the damage, give me the reduction to its application so that it actually applies the damage properly to its targets. Yeah, I've seen people like showcasing how they fit this on the test server, going, look at how much DPS it has. Yeah, it may show like 800 DPS hot on paper, but you're not going to apply that to anything smaller than a Citadel. Until that's fixed, then, the point is that the Tech 3 stealth bombers are utter trash. Let's move on then to the Caldari State. And again, starting with their Interceptor, we get the Condor II Interceptor. Now, straight off the gate, I'm just going to say here, because I don't want to have to keep jumping out to it, the Condor II Interceptor has a source radius of 130 meters, which is actually the largest of the Interceptors. It's a pretty large source radius, means it's the easiest one to scan down, though. It is still small enough that it's going to be difficult to scan for most ships. Now, what really disappoints me here about the Condor II Interceptor's appearance is the skin they've gone for. Obviously, that's the standard Condor, and this is actually the Condor Interceptor skin. It's pretty much identical. Now, I don't know if anyone remembers, but before they added all the new Tech 10 ships in the balance patch, this was actually a really cool metallic blue and pearl colour, and I really liked that. Now, unfortunately, it has gone. I don't have any screenshots to show that, but we literally look like the Condor Interceptor. I mean, heck, look, there's the Condor II Interceptor. Let's now tap onto the Condor Interceptor, and yeah, there are a few minor differences, but really nothing that stands out, right? it's basically the same skin, which is why for the thumbnail of this video and for the introduction, I've added the Gurustus Veteran skin on, because quite frankly, everything can be improved by adding the Gurustus Rabbit to the front of it. Anyway, let's have a look at its stats. So, like the others, it's a straight-up upgrade over the Condor II Interceptor, over the Condor Interceptor. As you'd expect, it's got the 2 in the name. It means it is just the better version, but obviously a lot more expensive. Very low signature radius, 23.6, decent flight velocity, slowest of all of them though, being the Caldari one, 477 meters per second, good scan resolution, again, lower than the others because it's Caldari, and apparently Netties hate Caldari, they can't be fast, they've got to have the largest signature radius, the largest scan resolution, and the slowest ships. But in fairness, that's warranted when it comes to the Condor II Interceptor. We have a mass of 1.1 million kilograms and an inertia modifier of 1.0. Now, what makes the Condor II Interceptor so terrifying compared to its compatriots? Because, basically, it's the same for the most part. It's got that +1 warp disrupt field immunity level, so it is completely immune to any interdictor bubbles. Of course it is. The idea is that it can fly through an interdictor bubble and pin someone down while the rest of the fleet come along and blow them up. That's why we get bonuses to warp disruptor optimal range, warp scrambler optimal range, and a reduction to the micro warp drive signature radius penalty, so that you can go whoosh right up into someone's face and tackle them. That's why the interceptors are known as tackle frigates, which is why I'm always so confused why they have 17.5% additional small missile torpedo damage to them. That is an insane amount of DPS. In fact, let's actually compare that. So we've got 3 high slots with a 17.5% small missile torpedo damage. Let's check that compared to the faction frigate that uses missiles. Oh, that's only got a 20% increase. Okay, yeah, that's a 25% increase across the board, but this doesn't have the immunity to bubbles. It doesn't have a lot of the other abilities that the Interceptors get. I think the Gamma in its current form might genuinely outclass the Condor II Interceptor, which is kind of how it should be, but it's one of the few faction frigates that actually does. But hey, anyway, the point I'm getting at here is the Condor II Interceptor is terrifying. The fact that it gets those bonuses to warp disruptor optimal range, warp scramble optimal range, and the micro warp drive signature radius penalty reduction means you can keep a micro warp drive running whilst you orbit a target at fairly comfortably at 16 kilometers out. Good luck to them webbing you, good luck to them scramming you. You're scramming them, they're not scramming you. You stay outside of their web and scram range, you're moving too fast for them to hit, with a signature radius that isn't big enough for them to hit, despite the fact you're using a micro warp drive, and the fact that you're moving that fast doesn't even matter. Your missiles are still guaranteed to hit as long as they're in range. And trust me, the damage that this thing can kick out, thanks to that small missile torpedo damage boost, is mad. This is one of those ones that I'm going to genuinely suggest that if you're going to fly one of these, I would probably not worry too much about additional damage rigs. You might put 1 or 2 on there, but I would actually go for the additional range, just to keep you safer out of scram and web range, just to keep orbiting and be an absolute asshole to deal with. Condor II Interceptors, well, the Condor Interceptor is one of the most terrifying of the current Interceptors. It's the only one that can be really tricky to deal with, because of the fact that it can actually outrange scrams and webs, whereas the others do struggle to apply damage if they're doing that. But hey, I don't know. I still think they all need nerfs, and that's coming from a frigate pilot. So let's move on to the Heron Explorer, and I didn't talk about the source radius because I hate jumping back and forth. Source radius here is 131 meters, so slightly larger, again, than some of the others. This is the largest in all terms, basically, of the Explorer frigates, and it does look really cool. I actually got some nice feedback of people who saw me using this one in the wide scanning tutorial video. I do really like it. I like the colour scheme on it. Yeah, okay, I complained about that on the Condor II Interceptor, simply because now the Condor II Interceptor looks exactly the same as the Condor Interceptor. But the Heron Explorer, I do quite like that sort of black and red to it, the very covert ops feel. Looks like the Buzzard a bit more, which is pretty cool. Anyway, we then come to its stats, and again, like the other Explorers, curiously, it gets a drone tube. I have no idea what that's for, because there is nothing that helps you do damage with the drones. In fact, there are no damage abilities here on this ship at all, so no matter what weapon you put on, you're just getting its raw damage. Plus a drone, you're not really going to go up against much in combat now, and drones at this point in time are purely combat. So maybe, I don't know, maybe we're going to get some kind of drone in the future that can do stuff. Maybe salvage drones might eventually be a thing. We know mining drones are going to come eventually, but I don't see why you'd put one of them on an Explorer either, just one of them. I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, the point of the Heron Explorer is that, again, compared to the other Explorers, it is Caldari, which means it is the slowest. It is the largest in regards to signature radius, and for some reason has the lowest scan resolution. It's also got a pretty high inertia modifier and a mass of 1.15 million kilograms, which makes it slightly more cumbersome than some of the others. That said, though, that flight velocity being low on paper, 438, doesn't actually hold water, because Advanced Frigate Command gives it an additional 25% flight velocity, which makes it the fastest raw flight velocity of any of the 4 Explorer frigates. This means if you want to come, if you jump into a gate camp, you're inside a bubble, and you want to keep that cloak on whilst you drift out, obviously you can't run prop mods, you have the fastest flight velocity. Heck, if you do the whole trick that when you land in a warp bubble, you sort of double tap in space and then immediately activate both the micro warp drive and the cloak, you'll get 1 activation out of the micro warp drive, and you'll put the covert ops cloak on, you still get the fastest speed getting out of that bubble. For me, this means that the Heron Explorer is the best at running gate camps, because it's just that little bit faster to get out of the bubble and get to a safe point where it can warp away, making it much harder for the enemy fleet to decloak you and lock onto you. Otherwise, though, its abilities are pretty much the same. It gets that massive increase to its cargo hold capacity, and it's a pretty big cargo hold to start with. 1,500 cubic meters, add on that additional 37.5% increase there, makes for a very big cargo hold. Excellent if you're going to be scanning, and who knows, maybe one day they'll add relic and data sites as well. We saw in my recent video that there are modules for that in the game, just whether or not we're going to get them, that would make sense to have a large cargo hold then. Otherwise, we get the same 10% scan resolution increase, which does nothing, a 5% reduction to Resonance Simulator minimum scan radius, which means you can scan more things easier, and a 5% reduction to the narrow resonance scanner scan radius. So it's going to be, if you're like scanning down other people for your fleet, they're going to have a harder time noticing that they've been scanned. I really like the Heron Explorer. This is probably my second favourite of the Explorers, and it's one you'll probably see me out and about a lot in, just for its ability to run gate camps quite comfortably. Finally then, we come to the Manticore 3, and I'm not going to launch onto too much on this one. I'm going to, make this a fairly quick little conversation. If you want to know more about the Manticore 3 and why I'm keeping this short, go and watch the little bit in the Amarr Empire section about the Nemesis, not the Nemesis 3, sorry, and the Purifier 3. Now, on paper, this looks awesome. 4th high slot, we've got decent signature radius, slow flight velocity, bit more mass and inertia than I would like, very low scan resolution as well, which, especially when you consider that this is going to have a cloak fitted to it most of the time, and that is therefore going to be reduced by 40 to 50%, yeah, that makes a very slow locking target. Who cares that we've got a fast cloaking device lock delay? You just literally drop the cloak and start locking on. You've got a very slow scan resolution there, which means it's going to take a long time to lock on to anything that is not a battlecruiser or larger. Again, we're going to be able to fit large torpedoes. We get some nice bonuses to thermal and kinetic, which is useful against both armor and shields, which is awesome. We get extra range. We even get a reduction to the signature radius here on the Manticore 3. Unfortunately, it's large torpedoes, and large torpedoes are utter cuck right now. They've got no application whatsoever. You get excellent DPS on paper, but you cannot apply it to anything smaller than a planet, basically. Which means until, again, I've said it before, until that gets fixed, until we get bonuses on the Manticore 3 to it having additional torpedo explosion velocity and an explosion radius reduction, there's just no point running these over any of the previous ones. Unless, of course, you're going to just put, like, small missiles in the 4 top slots there and go hunting with those, but yeah, you don't get any bonuses to that, so I kind of don't see the point. Just fly a Condor. Moving on then to the Gallente Federation. These, of course, are home to the ugliest and weirdest looking frigates in EVE Echoes, but let's start off then with the II Interceptor, which looks like a jet fighter, got a little bit drunk and fell over and broke its wing. Anyway, I quite like the II. I make fun of its appearance, but I do quite like it. I also really like the Aliastra colour scheme. I think that's pretty sweet. Certainly, the complaint I had about the fact that the Condor II Interceptor looks exactly like the Condor pure Interceptor was the issue that I had with the Atron II Interceptor before they introduced this new skin. It looked very much like both the Atron and the Atron Interceptor. They're very, very similar colours to sort of that typical Gallente swamp green. Anyway, looking at its attributes, same profile there, 33333, 3 across the boards on everything, biggest cargo hold of any of the Interceptors, just like the Atron Interceptor had a bigger cargo hold than the other, the Atron II Interceptor has a larger cargo hold again, which, remember, since we've got that interdictor sphere immunity, means that if you put some cargo rigs onto this, you can make it into a surprisingly good little cargo runner that you can offline autopilot pretty much through nullsec. You don't have to worry about any of the gate camps, because you're probably going to warp faster than anyone can point you, and you can still, like, you know, avoid, you're immune to any of the interdiction spheres, so you'll just warp straight out of those. The signature radius is pretty small, 22.7, very fast flight velocity of 515, excellent scan resolution of 934, and a pretty good inertia modifier as well. It's not the highest of the Interceptors, the Tech 2 Interceptors, but it is right up there. 1.05 million kilograms, 1.1 time inertia, makes for a very fast aligning frigate, very agile frigate indeed. And I've forgotten to do it again, so let's have a look at its source radius. Source radius is 126 meters, which again is pretty small. NetEase, please add the source radius here. Get rid of that bloody sensor strength. No one gives a damn about it. It literally does nothing. Put the source radius there, or put source radius above signature radius, or some, I don't know, somewhere. Fit it on here somewhere, please. As we come into its stats, you'll see that the Atron II Interceptor, same thing as we're expecting from before. Warp disruption field immunity level means that it just warps right out of interdictor spheres. Same 6% warp disruptor optimal range, 6% warp scrambler optimal range, and a 15% reduction to warp micro warp drive signature radius penalty. We then get small railgun accuracy fall off and small railgun damage bonuses. Snub-nosed railguns are going to work well here, but I actually do quite like using rifled railguns on Atron Interceptors. I know I'm pretty much alone in that, but it does work surprisingly well. Again, 17.5% increase to the damage there, to me, is utterly insane. It does not need this much DPS. That puts it right up there next to a faction frigate, especially by the time that you put a nanocore onto this, which the Daredevil doesn't currently have. You know what else the Daredevil doesn't have? Warp disruption field immunity level, and a 22.7 meter signature radius. This is also, I think, faster than the Daredevil. Let's have a look. 515 compared to the Daredevils. I should know these off by heart by now, really. 439. Yeah, it's considerably faster than the fastest faction frigate, and it is smaller as well. Again, people say, oh, it's not all about the DPS, you know, yeah, you're right, it's not all about the DPS. The Atron II Interceptor has arguably better skills with that roll bonus, and it has better survivability because it's smaller and it's faster. I don't know, some of you seem to agree that with me that the faction frigates cost so much, they should be the bling ships. They should be right up there on par with the Interceptors. Other people say that, well, no, the whole point of a faction frigate is that you can buy it super early. If you've got the money, you can buy it before you hit Tech 10. It's going to take you a good year of playing the game before you hit Tech 10. So these are kind of the better ships in the fact that they reward you for getting that far. I would say, I don't care that it takes that. These are Interceptors. Interceptors should not be outdoing faction frigates. Maybe an assault frigate at tech level 10 should, but not an Interceptor. These are designed to just be tackle frigates that rush into your opponent's face and hold them in position. Not rush into your opponent's face, hold them into position, and rip them limb from limb. They do entirely too much damage, and that again is from a frigate pilot. But let's move on then to everyone's ugly child, the Imicus Explorer. This is the ugly stepchild of all of the different frigates. It just doesn't get better no matter what skin you put on it. Even the Serpentis Veteran just makes it look like it's an Imicus that someone finally threw up on. Even the really cool Monsoon, great in a gold and red, love the colour combination, hate the look of the ship. Now, the Imicus Explorer, again, very low source radius there, 127 meters, and like the other exploration frigates, we're getting a random drone tube thrown in, along with the third combat and engineering rigs. Looking at the rest of the other stats here, it's worth noting that the Imicus Explorer has very high defense, brilliant armor and structure, if you're ever going to worry about that, which personally I don't. It's got a surprisingly low mass here, though. That is actually one of the lowest masses I've seen in a long time. It's not even 1 million kilograms. It is literally 997,000 kilograms. With an inertia modifier, though, that is pretty large at 2.65 times, does still mean that it's pretty cumbersome. It's an Imicus. It's not just ugly, it's kind of lumbering. Signature radius though, 24 meters is pretty good. Flight velocity 472 is pretty good. Scan resolution is not bad for one of these at all. Ultimately though, let's be fair, the point that you're going to be using an Immicus Explorer isn't even really scanning. It's the fact that it's got a 1500 cubic meter cargo hold, and it gets a 10% increase to cargo hold capacity per level. So you're getting an additional, you do that, 50% on that. Before you've put any of the cargo hold rigs on that, you're already sitting at, by my maths in my head there, 2,250 cubic meters. That's an insane amount of cargo. Then you add in some cargo optimizer rigs, preferably like the level 3 ones, and bam, you have a frigate that is carrying an insane amount of cargo from nullsec into highsec to drop off at an ITC. You've got the covert ops cloaking device on there, which means that you can kind of, escape through a gate camp if you happen to get caught by one. You just kind of creep through the bubble. Flight velocity, again, it's not the fastest of them, but it's pretty good. You've got the scan resolution, resonance simulator minimum scan radius, and narrow resonance scan radius there as well. If you do actually want to use it as an exploration vessel, it is getting scan bonuses. Again, scan resolution itself does absolutely nothing in the game, but the reduction to minimum scan radius means you can scan more ships and more resources, more nihilist gates, that kind of thing, and the 5% reduction to the narrow resonance scan radius means that you are less likely to alert a ship that it is being scanned. I think, though, in fairness, this is still the ugly stepchild to me. I can't get over how it looks. I want to, there are two ways to look at this. You've got the two glowing lights there with, sort of what looks like a nose and a mouth. It looks like one of those Easter Island heads got a little bit confused. Or you can look at the two sort of engine thingies here at the top, and sort of look at those as eyes, and then the two strip lights below it as a mouth with a nose in the middle, and then that sort of a crooked arm coming out the side like he's stumbling home drunk. I don't know. It's just an ugly, ugly ship, and quite frankly, if I'm going to be doing exploring, I'm going to use literally anything else. The only reason I'm ever going to fly an Immicus Explorer is just because of that cargo. Finally then, the Nemesis 3. If we have a look at this, we've got a very low source radius, 129, okay, a low source radius of 129. Cool looking ship. I do like the way the Nemesis ships look. They are pretty cool looking ships, very cool looking frigates in fact. Again, the Serpentis Veteran does look pretty cool, though I'm still confused as to why they have the Gallente Federation logo on the side of these. Even on the Serpentis Veteran skins, surely that should be the Serpentis Corporation logo, but hey! The problem with the Nemesis 3 is the same as with the other stealth bombers, so forgive a quick little rant if you've watched the other sections. Nemesis 3, 4 high slots. Awesome, we can fit 4 large torpedoes on here. We've got a cloaking device that we can drop and instantly start locking on, and then we can open fire with 4 large torpedoes. And they get more damage, more kinetic and explosive, which is going to really help them punch through armor. That's awesome, right? Yeah, except they're large torpedoes. Large torpedoes cannot apply their damage to anything smaller than a planet, and quite frankly, the fact that you get a 0%, an instant ability to lock on when that cloak drops, you've got a scan resolution of 364, you then have the penalty for having a covert ops cloak fitted, which is like 40% to 50% reduction, meaning it takes a long time to lock on, and then you apply no damage to anything that isn't a battleship or a citadel, basically. Pointless, trash, don't see why you'd fly any one of these unless you just wanted to make a cool looking ship and fit 4 standard missiles on it and just forget the fact that it gets large torpedo bonuses. At which point, why are you spending that much money on a frigate? Just go for literally anything else. Fly a Condor! Finally then, we come to the Minmatar Republic. Let's start off with the Minmatar Interceptor, which is of course the Slasher II Interceptor, and once again, I forget the source radius. Source radius on this is 110 meters. This is tiny. That is a source radius that is smaller than the Dramiel, and that's a point that we're going to be looking at an awful lot in this section, so brace yourselves. Now the Slasher, of course, is a really cool looking frigate. It's actually bigger than several destroyers. It's a very large ship, 188 meters on its long axis. The Angel Veteran skin makes it look amazing, and that is what I will have mine looking like. Its stats are pretty good. 3 highs, 3 mids, 3 lows, 3 of each of the rig types, and fairly decent defenses, but it's down here that this thing really shines. 18.5 meters signature radius, 577 meters per second flight velocity, and a scan resolution of 1001 millimeters. That's mad. Couple that with a mass of 1.075 million kilograms and 1.0 inertia, you have an incredibly fast, incredibly small, incredibly agile frigate that is going to just absolutely ruin someone's day, especially since it's completely immune to warp bubbles. It gets the bonuses to warp disruptor optimal range, warp scrambler optimal range, and warp drive signature radius penalty. On top of this, it then gets a 17.5% increase to small cannon damage and a 7.5% increase to small cannon tracking speed. Please note, it is the only one of the interceptors that gets a bonus to its weapon's tracking speed, which means it is actually capable of applying its damage to its targets really well. And yes, that is including using strike cannons. Strike cannons actually do remarkably well on a Slasher II Interceptor. I still can't resist going in with the autocannons and just blasting into someone's face and opening up an entire, not a can of hurt, it is an entire dustbin of hurt, possibly even a shipping container of hurt. It is a lot of hurt there. This is a frankly insane ship, and that's before we put on any of the nanocores. Now, to explain how absolutely insane this is, yeah, we're doing this rant. We're going to jump into the Angel Cartel, and we're going to go to add comparisons here between the Drumiel. So, they both have the same fitting profile. 3 highs, 3 mids, 3 lows, 3 of each of the rig types. Yeah, it's kind of what you get. For roll bonuses, the Slasher II Interceptor gets a very useful immune to warp disruption fields, so it can just warp straight out of interdictor spheres. The Drumiel gets a nice warp acceleration and a nice warp speed, very useful if you want to travel long distances, but as far as combat goes, it's, you know, it's extra. It's not really doing anything in a standard fight, other than perhaps getting you out of a fight that a split second before you get scrammed thanks to the warp acceleration. Then it has a frankly useless 5 seconds damage control activation time increase, so we're just going to ignore that one and move on. We're going to look at the rest of the stats here. So, ignoring the warp disruptor optimal range, warp scrambler optimal range, and warp drive signature radius penalty, let's have a look at its actual damage and stats here. So, you'll notice that the Drumiel gets a 10% small cannon damage, compared to the Slasher II Interceptor getting 17.5% small cannon damage. So, the Slasher II Interceptor gets the bigger bonus. But hang on, I hear you cry. Doesn't the Drumiel also get a 5% reduction to small cannon activation time? Well, yes it does, and that's burning the other end of the DPS damage per second stat. You can either increase DPS by making things fire faster, or by making the damage bigger, and the Drumiel does both. It makes higher damage, and it reduces the activation time, which makes it a Gatling gun, basically. Unfortunately, that alone already works out about the equivalent of 17.5% increase to small cannon damage. They're very, very similar. I've been flying these two ships side by side on Fulmination for a while, and yeah, they are very, very similar in their DPS output. Once you put a nanocore onto the Slasher II Interceptor, which are currently missing for the Drumiel, the Slasher II Interceptor categorically out-DPSs the Drumiel by a notable margin. The only difference that they have here on the stats is that the Drumiel gets that 10% small cannon accuracy fall-off, which, yeah, means that it doesn't have to be quite as close to optimal to still have its autocannons doing good damage. Now, this is where things then start to fall apart. First of all, okay, the Drumiel has higher overall defense. That's nice, right? Yeah, except look at the flight velocity. The Slasher II Interceptor has a raw flight velocity of 100 meters per second faster. That's before you increase it with by percentage with things like Frigate Command. That's before your Afterburner or Micro Warp Drive or whatever then amplifies it. And remember, a 10% increase on 477 is 47.7. A 10% increase on 577 is 57.7. So it is a bigger increase, making it considerably faster than the Drumiel. It gets a better warp speed. Okay, yes, but the Drumiel does get the warp speed increase there, so actually no it doesn't. It's 7.5 compared to 5.5. But okay, what else? Power grid output, 42 megawatts compared to 61. The Drumiel wins. Yeah, but if you fit a Drumiel with autocannons, you'll see it's got an absolute ton of power grid left over, so what's the point of the extra? The capacitor's nicer, right? Yeah, but again, if you're not getting hit, you don't need to run shield boosters. If you're firing cannons, you don't use capacitor for that either. The capacitor bank here is pretty much only for running prop. Finally then, cargo hold. The Slasher II Interceptor wins. The source radius? the Slasher II Interceptor wins. And in fact, if we just do a quick run and jump into this and have a little look-see, as the final point, let's go down to the mass and inertia. 950,000 kilograms of mass, 1.6 times inertia. If we then move into the Slasher II Interceptor, you'll see that comparatively, it's actually slightly more mass, but the lower inertia modifier works out more agile in the long run. The Slasher II Interceptor is categorically better than the Dramiel, and that needs fixing. Moving on then, the Probe Explorer. Yeah, I've just watched, I'm going to be watching the stats on this later. That's the point where the viewership is just going to drop off on this video. Anyway, Probe Explorer. I'm very excited about this ship. This is probably one of the ships I'm looking forward to most upon hitting tech level 10. Not for anything overly powerful, other than the fact that it's a probe in jet black colours. It looks awesome, and yeah, then I'm probably going to put the Angel Veteran skin on it anyway, and completely ignore that fact. The advantage that the Probe Explorer has, if you can call it that, is that it gets the additional drone tube, and it gets additional rigs. It's got 3 of each of the rig types, rather than just 2 on the Covert Ops variant, so it's going to be even better at scanning, things like it's just going to be better at scanning. It has an insanely small signature radius of 19.6, excellent flight velocity of 529, brilliant scan resolution, though not quite as good as obviously the Slasher II Interceptor, fairly low mass, but a very high inertia modifier means as an Explorer frigate it is still fairly cumbersome. Very large cargo hold though, again 1500 cubic meters. We then have the typical Explorer builds here. Covert Ops cloaking devices can be fitted, useless scan resolution, 5% reduction to minimum scan radius, 5% reduction to narrow resonance scan radius. This time around though, in addition to the 7.5% cargo hold capacity, we have a further 4% reduction to the signature radius, so that 19.6 is actually reduced by a further 20%, which is just insane. It's a fifth smaller. Like, it's so hard to lock onto a probe and very hard to hit it with anything to do any meaningful damage. This makes the Probe Explorer my personal favourite. Yes, the Heron is better at running through gate camps. Yes, the Magnate can warp faster and thus is better at travelling long distances. Yes, the Imicus is far uglier and can carry more cargo. But the Probe, to me, it's a nice middle ground, and it's a Minmatar ship, and I like that, and I'm biased. I like Minmatar ships. I think you'll see me around in a Probe Explorer an awful lot. Finally then, we come to the Hound 3, and it is the same disappointing mess as the other stealth bombers. Looks absolutely badass, looks on paper like it's got amazing stats and abilities, but the fact is, it's 4 large torpedoes that cannot apply their damage to anything smaller than a planet. It has a fairly high mass, a very high inertia modifier, a terrible scan resolution that is made even worse by the Covert Ops cloak that you fitted on there, which pretty much halves the scan resolution there, so it takes an age to lock onto anything, and then it can't apply its damage anyway. Basically, as I've said with the other Stealth Bomber 3s, these are only going to be useful when netties realise that large torpedoes are utterly terrible, and either fix the large torpedoes or give the Hound and the other Stealth Bombers a reduction to torpedo explosion velocity and a reduction to torpedo explosion radius and an increase to torpedo explosion velocity. Until then, like the other Stealth Bombers, the Hound 3 is beautiful, beautiful trash. And there we have it, my personal thoughts and opinions on the various different frigates coming at tech level 10. I'm very excited about the Explorer frigates. I think I'm going to be personally having a lot of fun with those, and I hope you do too. I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys get up to. The Interceptor frigates I'm pretty hyped for as well, but equally very tired of. I'm tired of Interceptors now. They're just way too good. Like, if you are a frigate pilot, you are piloting Interceptors and pretty much not anything else. Arguably, most of those Interceptors are better than the particular faction frigates that they represent. I would argue perhaps the Worm and the Cruor maybe are the exception to that, but otherwise the others just out DPS and outdo, especially the Slasher II Interceptor. That thing is just mad compared to the Dramiel. The Condor II Interceptor, as you see on screen now, is going to be ludicrously popular, very powerful, very damaging, going to be an absolute nightmare to face against in PvP. And there's a part of me that's looking forward to that, but there's another part of me that's just done with Interceptors. I'm getting bored of them. They're just too good. They should not be doing absolutely everything. But hey, we've got no alternatives at Tech 10 in frigates at the moment, so we're going to like that until netties agencies come along and release things like the Rifter Assault at Tech 10, the Tristan Assault and things like that, to get us our additional Tech 10 frigates that are going to have better bonuses than the Interceptors, and the Interceptors are going to get a little bit of a nerf as well, I hope. Who knows? I can pray. Anyway, that, as I said, wraps things up quite nicely. It's about time for me to announce another one of our weekly contests as well. I've fallen behind a little bit on that due to me being away in Masuna on adventures, but if you are watching this right now, do make sure that you are in the Catskull Cartel Discord. You don't have to be a member of the Catskull Cartel to be there. Every week I do a big Combo Omega giveaway. I announce a theme on Monday. People submit screenshots and things like that, artwork, that kind of thing for the particular theme or topic, like we've done lasers, we've done destroyers, we've done exploration, that kind of thing. And I, at the end of that week, pick 2 people randomly to win a month of Combo Omega each, which is a really nice little prize, I think. Helps a lot of you guys out, and just means you free Combo Omega, folks. Just do it. You put some screenshots up, you win a month of Combo Omega if you're lucky. So anyway, make sure you're in there. You've got to be in it to win it, as they say on the National Lottery, etc. I'm gonna go now because I am definitely on a rambling thing. It's late in the evening here. It's not. It's like 5:10, but it feels like it's 10 past midnight. Anyway, thank you for watching this one right the way to the end, folks. Sorry it got a little bit ranty in places. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.